Mythological folklore, legends, cryptids, whatever you want to call them, is always an interesting rabbit hole to fall into. It's also a very deep one, and over the past few months, I fell into that hole. One of the ones that I want to touch upon today is the Wendigo. And the Wendigos, if you don't know, are possibly one of the most popular creatures in folklore other than your standard vampire and werewolf. Originally coming from the Algonquian tribe in the Great Lakes area of the United States and Canada, the Wendigo is a malevolent spirit that would possess human beings, most of the time after a human consumed another's flesh. Anyone who ate human flesh were said to have an insatiable hunger for more caused by the Wendigo and would go on to commit more murders and cannibalize others. Due to movies, books, and video games, the Wendigo instantly grabbed the attention of everyone, even those who are not quite familiar with the folklore itself. Before we touch upon the original stories, we should probably go over the insane amount of media that it's portrayed in and the many different ways it's been imagined. The Wendigo appeared in a bunch of works, in the form of movies, books, and video games. Let's start with the heavy hitters such as Stephen King's Pet Sematary, where it is a flesh-eating demon from hell. It's shown to be more demon than it is human, with yellow-gray eyes, ram's horns instead of ears, white vapor coming from its nostrils, and a long, rotting yellow tongue. Stephen King took a much more crazy and imaginative approach, so to say, and turned the Wendigo into a necromancer who could possess, brainwash, and all that fun stuff. Of course, it's quite far from the original legend, but I could understand someone wanting to make something theirs, I guess. And then there are TV shows that directly name the Wendigo, such as Supernatural, where it appears multiple times throughout the series, Charmed, where one of the characters gets attacked by one and begins to transform into it, and of course, Hannibal, where it is called the Stag. In other strange depictions, the Wendigo is also in Marvel Comics, first appearing in The Incredible Hulk Volume 2, number 162, where he, I shit you not, fought the Hulk. Even then, it shared some of the characteristics of the actual folklore. Of course, it takes its own creative liberties, but it is still really cool to see it in so many different ways. It's even in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. There's a race of ghost horse named Wendigo. They are even in DuckTales. I could go on all day about how hilarious it is that they somehow threw Wendigos into DuckTales lore, but I'll just leave it to your imagination. Movies and TV shows are cool and all, but my favorite depictions by far are in video games. In Fallout 76, Wendigos appeared as an enemy along with other cryptids. These sorry souls were once human, who mutated due to the consumption of human flesh, and I'm sure the nuclear warheads also had a part to play. Oh my god! In the survival horror game Until Dawn, Wendigos appear as a main antagonist and are a very close resemblance to the original stories. No random antlers and demonic powers, just cursed individuals who consumed human flesh that turned into tall, skinny, and grotesque humanoids. I spent plenty of time talking about the pop culture side of the Wendigos, but it is hard not to respect the impact it had on such amazing stories. Although we have one more story to talk about that I wanted to leave last due to some controversy. In 1910, Algernon Blackwood made a story simply titled The Wendigo, which is one of the most highly praised Wendigo stories ever written. But there is some criticism about cultural appropriation, but I'll leave it up to you to form your own opinion about. Honestly, if I were to summarize it, we would be here all day, so I recommend you go read it for yourself or even check out John Solo, who did a fantastic video essentially summarizing it. Now with all that out of the way, let's jump into, in my opinion, some of the most interesting stories of the Wendigo out there. This guy, also easily known as Jack Fiddler, was a chief and a shaman of the Sucker Dudum, or the Sucker Clan, with the Anishinaabe, which is essentially a group of indigenous people who lived in the Great Lakes region. Jack Fiddler was said to have the ability to protect his people from spells, conjure animals, and most importantly, kill Wendigos. Because of the frequent famine and disease, Jack Fiddler claimed to have defeated 14 Wendigos in his lifetime, although some of these can be questioned about whether or not they were even Wendigos, or if they were just sickly and near death. Some were allegedly sent from other shamans against Fiddler's people. Some were members of his own clan who were overtaken by the desire to consume human flesh, and other people were close to death and would beg to be killed so they would not turn into Wendigo while dying. Even Fiddler's brother was killed after turning when out on a trading expedition due to running out of food. And I don't know if it's in bad taste, but just imagine like The Walking Dead or something, how somebody doesn't want to turn into a zombie, so they just sort of kill them. Jack Fiddler's reputation grew among other clans, such as Cree, due to growing concern about him and his people. For context, the Cree do not really believe the Wendigo as the Ojibwe do, and often explained away Wendigo cases for mental illness and superstition. Fiddler, who was approached by Cree, was asked to convert his people to Christianity. Fiddler respectfully declined and would then end up being some of the only indigenous people in North America living in their traditional manner in the beginning of the 20th century. Sadly, like many other indigenous people at the time, Fiddler's story ended due to not wanting to convert his beliefs to others. In 1907, Northwest Mounted Police heard about Fiddler. Wanting to push Canadian law in the North, they went up to the Sucker camp, and both Jack and Joseph Fiddler were arrested for murder. They were being charged for murdering Joseph's daughter-in-law, and I am so sorry if I butcher this, Wasakapigwe. Throughout Canada, stories of devil worship spread around, and many people wanted to see justice. Of course, the opportunity to use both Fiddlers as an example against the Sucker people arose. Jack Fiddler would eventually escape, and then hanged himself nearby. However, Joseph Fiddler went to trial. The eyewitness testified that, I am sorry again, Wasakapigwe was killed because of an incurable sickness, and it was a custom of their people. Soon enough, the Wendigo was brought into question, and once again, they explained it was normal in their culture to euthanize people who were incurable. Despite many pleas, Joseph was sentenced to death. Although appeals secured his release, tragically he was put to death 3 days prior. And this is sort of a callback to earlier. Jack Fiddler was also a character in Until Dawn that I mentioned earlier, but he was the grandson of the Jack Fiddler. One last thing that I thought was incredibly interesting to read was a section in the Jesuit Relations. For those who don't know, the Jesuits are the largest male religious order in the Catholic Church, and the Jesuit Relations was a yearly report written to record their efforts to spread their religion around New France, which is just current-day Canada. To word it much easier and more normal, it's just a documentation of stuff that they did and saw in Canada between 1632 and 1673. In Volume 46, years 1659 to 1661, there's a passage that describes an ailment that had affected their men, and it sounds exactly like they're describing someone who turns into a Wendigo. What caused us greater concern was the intelligence that met us upon entering the lake, namely, that the men deputed by our conductor for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous where they were to await our coming, had met their death the previous winter in a very strange manner. Those poor men, according to the report 72 given us, were seized with an ailment unknown to us, but not very unusual among the people we were seeking. They are afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men, like veritable werewolves, and devour them voraciously, without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily, the more they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and as death is the sole remedy among those simple people for checking such acts of murder, they were slain in order to stay the course of their madness. This news might well have arrested our journey if our belief in it had been as strong as the assurance we received of its truth. So there you have it. The Jesuit Relations just proved that Wendigos are real. Yeah, it's all right there. It's insane. This part is a little away from the research that I conducted, and instead it's more of an observation of a pattern with the people who would cite the Jesuit Relations in their work. Whenever the Jesuit Relations was cited in something, they would always take out the part where the Jesuits were trashing on the indigenous people of the land, and the Jesuits would call them in passages before and after what I read. They would call them savages, simple people, and even insinuate that they kill just to kill. And it was pretty disgusting in my opinion. I just wanted to point that out because it's something that I noticed, and I didn't really see anybody point that out either, that the Jesuit Relations were sort of showing disbelief for literally everything they told them, and they felt like they were lying the entire time because they were quote unquote simple people, savages, and murderers. And of course, all of what I went through here barely scratches the surface of one of the most famous folklores, myths, cryptids, critters, creatures, things, beasts, whatever you want to call it. That's about all for this one. I thought it would have been a good start to winter. Comment below what you think, suggestions, if I screwed up, if I need to work on my pronunciations and whatnot. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.